When people hear about data breaches in the news, the numbers can sometimes feel almost abstract. Headlines might say that millions of records were exposed, or that a company suffered a major cyber attack. But occasionally a breach happens that is so large it changes how the entire cybersecurity industry thinks about digital security. One of the biggest examples of this happened in 2013, when a breach at a company called Yahoo exposed data from an astonishing number of user accounts.
Breach Bites TV.
At the time, Yahoo was one of the largest internet companies in the world. Its email service had hundreds of millions of users, and for many people it was one of the first online accounts they had ever created. People used Yahoo accounts to send emails, sign up for websites, store personal information, and manage other online services. That made Yahoo an incredibly valuable target for attackers. But when the breach was eventually revealed, the scale shocked even experienced cybersecurity professionals. Investigators discovered that the attackers had accessed data from approximately 3 billion user accounts. To put that number into perspective, that meant nearly every Yahoo account that existed at the time had potentially been compromised. To really understand how massive that number is, it helps to compare it to the size of the internet at the time. In 2013, there were roughly 2.5 to 3 billion internet users worldwide. That means the number of compromised accounts in this breach was on the same scale as the entire global online population. Of course, not every person had only one account. Many users had multiple Yahoo accounts for different purposes, like personal use, work, or spam signups. But even with that in mind, the scale of the breach was unprecedented. It wasn't just one company being affected. It was a significant portion of the internet's user base. For attackers, a data set of that size is incredibly valuable. It can be used for targeted phishing campaigns, identity theft, or sold in underground marketplaces where other cybercriminals purchase data to use in their own attacks. The larger the dataset, the more opportunities it creates. And in this case, the dataset was about as large as it could possibly be. The attackers were able to obtain massive amounts of sensitive information. This included usernames, email addresses, phone numbers, dates of birth, and encrypted passwords. In some cases, security questions and answers were also exposed. While the passwords were encrypted, weaker encryption methods can sometimes be cracked using powerful computers and specialized software. What made the situation even more concerning was that many people reused the same passwords across multiple websites. That meant the breach didn't just affect Yahoo accounts. If someone used the same password for other services like social media accounts, online banking, or shopping platforms, attackers could potentially use the stolen credentials to access those accounts as well. What makes incidents like this especially concerning is that attackers don't always need to break through every layer of security. In many cases, they only need to find one weak point. Large organizations often have thousands of internal systems, each with its own configuration, access controls, and potential vulnerabilities. If even one of those systems is improperly secured, it can become the entry point. Once attackers gain a foothold, they often spend time exploring the environment quietly. This phase is sometimes referred to as reconnaissance or lateral movement, where the attacker maps out the internal network, identifies valuable systems, and looks for ways to expand their access. During this stage, attackers may attempt to escalate their privileges, meaning they try to gain higher levels of access within the system. For example, they might move from a standard user account to an administrative account that has broader control over systems and data. This process can take time, and in some cases, attackers intentionally move slowly to avoid detection. Instead of triggering alarms with aggressive activity, they blend in with normal system behavior. It's making it much harder for security teams to identify what's happening. So how did something this massive actually happen? The breach itself was believed to be carried out by a sophisticated group of attackers who were able to gain access to Yahoo's internal network. Once inside, they were able to access systems that stored user account information. In large organizations, these systems often contain enormous databases that manage authentication and account records for millions of users. Instead of targeting individual accounts, the attackers focused on extracting data from these centralized systems. Once they had access, they were able to copy large portions of the database containing account information. Because the systems were designed to manage millions of users at once, compromising them provided access to an equally massive amount of data. One of the most troubling aspects of the breach was how long it took to fully understand what had happened. The initial intrusion occurred in 2013, but the full scale of the breach wasn't publicly disclosed until years later. As investigations continued, the estimated number of affected accounts kept growing until it eventually reached the 3 billion mark. During that time, millions of people continued using their Yahoo accounts without realizing their data may have already been stolen. This delay highlighted one of the most difficult challenges in cybersecurity: detecting breaches quickly enough to limit the damage. Large organizations generate enormous volumes of system logs, login records, and network traffic every day. Hidden inside that activity, attackers may attempt to blend in with normal operations, if the attack is subtle enough. It can take months or even years before security teams detect unusual patterns that reveal a breach has occurred. One of the reasons detection can take so long is because modern systems generate an overwhelming amount of data. Every login attempt, file access, system change, and network request can be logged. For large organizations, this can mean billions of log entries being created every single day. Security teams rely on tools to analyze this data and look for anomalies. But distinguishing between normal behavior and malicious activity is incredibly challenging. For example, if an attacker logs in using valid credentials, their activity may initially appear legitimate. Over time, small indicators might begin to stand out. Be the account is accessing systems it normally doesn't use. Be it's downloading more data than usual. Be it's logging in at unusual times or from unexpected locations. But each of these signals on its own might not be enough to immediately trigger a response. This is why many breaches are only discovered after significant damage has already been done. By the time the activity is clearly identified as malicious, attackers may have already extracted large amounts of data. Another factor that made the Yahoo breach particularly impactful was the value of the stolen data. Email accounts are often considered the master key to many online services. Password reset links, verification messages, and account confirmations are all typically sent through email. If attackers gain access to an email account, they may be able to reset passwords for other services linked to that address. This makes email providers extremely attractive targets for attackers. A single compromised email account can sometimes unlock access to dozens of other accounts connected to it. The breach also demonstrated how attackers often focus on centralized infrastructure rather than individual users. Instead of trying to hack millions of people one by one, attackers look for the systems that manage those users behind the scenes. If those systems can be compromised, attackers may gain access to enormous amounts of data all at once. After the breach was disclosed, Yahoo was forced to take a number of major security measures. The company required users to reset passwords, invalidated security questions that may have been exposed, and strengthened its authentication systems. Security teams also conducted extensive investigations to understand how the attackers gained access and what systems were affected. The incident also had serious business consequences. Around the time the breach became public, Yahoo was in the process of negotiating a major acquisition deal. When the scale of the breach was revealed, the company's valuation and the final terms of the acquisition were significantly affected. Beyond the immediate impact on Yahoo itself, the breach had ripple effects across the entire technology industry. Companies began investing more heavily in security monitoring, stronger encryption practices, and improved incident detection capabilities. Governments and regulators also started paying closer attention to how companies protect user data and how quickly they disclose breaches when they occur. For everyday internet users, the Yahoo breach served as a powerful reminder of how much personal information is stored online. Many people had created Yahoo accounts years earlier and forgotten about them entirely. Yet those accounts still contain data that could potentially be used for identity theft or targeted phishing attacks. The breach also reinforced an important lesson about password security. Using the same password across multiple websites dramatically increases the impact of any single data breach. When attackers obtain credentials from one compromised platform, they often test those credentials across many other services in hopes that users reuse the same login information. Today, cybersecurity professionals strongly recommend using unique passwords for every account and enabling multi-factor authentication whenever possible. These practices make it significantly harder for attackers to turn stolen credentials into full account takeovers. Although the Yahoo breach remains one of the largest in history, It also helped push the industry towards stronger security practices. Companies now place greater emphasis on protecting centralized authentication systems, encrypting sensitive data more effectively, and monitoring for unusual activity that could signal an intrusion. But perhaps the most important lesson from the breach is that even the largest technology companies are not immune to security failures. Complex systems, massive user bases, and evolving cyber threats create an environment where mistakes or vulnerabilities can have enormous consequences. And when those systems contain data from billions of people, the impact of a single breach can reach nearly every corner of the internet. Another important aspect of breaches like this is what happens to the data after it's stolen. Contrary to what many people imagine, the data isn't always used immediately. In many cases, it becomes part of a much larger ecosystem of cybercrime. Stolen data is often packaged, categorized, and sold on underground forums. Different types of data have different values. Email accounts with verified access can be particularly valuable because they can be used for account takeovers or phishing campaigns. Personal information like names, dates of birth, and phone numbers can be used for identity theft or social engineering attacks. Over time, this data can circulate between different groups of attackers, each using it for their own purposes. That means the impact of a single breach can continue for years, long after the initial incident occurred. This is one of the reasons why data breaches are so difficult to fully recover from. Even if a company fixes the vulnerability that caused the breach, the stolen data may still be out there, being used in ways that are impossible to track. Understanding how incidents like this happen helps both organizations and individuals recognize the importance of strong security practices in a world where digital identities have become deeply woven into everyday life. If you want to learn how real cyber attacks unfold and how organizations defend against them, subscribe to Breach Bytes TV for weekly breakdowns of major cybersecurity events and the lessons we can learn from them.